Thank you, listeners, for joining us. Elko Live today features our guest in studio from the Elko County District Attorney's Office. He is the District Attorney. So pleased to welcome Tyler Ingram today, and especially on this day of all days. Tyler, this is really a great day for our community. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, this is a great day. I see that on your sheet right there. That makes me happy.
Yep, it's got a smiley face and everything. So when we first started talking about the concept for the Great Basin Child Advocacy Center, we were just saying, I think one of my earliest interviews is from about 2018. But you and your staff and your team and the community go back at least a dozen years on this project.
Yeah, I'd say at least a dozen years. That's when we first started forming the multidisciplinary team to get this process in place. And it took that many years to finally get a facility where all these things happen for victims of child sexual and physical abuse.
So why is today such a great day? Tell us what's happening.
Kind of what you just mentioned, Lori. This has been in the works for at least 12 years that I've been involved in, and probably before that it was in the works. But it's a good day to finally see that our dream is becoming a reality. We're having the opening ceremony today for our Child Advocacy Center, which we're already operating, but today's the official ceremony day. So just for all the people who will be attending that to see that we made a plan and we followed through.
It is a great work, and the work is continuing, and we should talk about what the goal, the concept, who's actually in the building. It's located on College Avenue, 1401. The site of the old police station. First it was a Mormon church. It's right across from the city swimming pool. It's a sweet little spot in the city.
It's a great spot. The purpose of the building is it's for child sexual and physical abuse, and its focus is on the well-being of the child and also the child's family. So whenever a child is sexually and physically abused, of course, there are consequences for the abuse. And we tried to address that from a multidisciplinary approach where mental health professionals, law enforcement officers, prosecutors, social workers, DCFS, all play a part to make sure the kid's put in the best possible position for success later in life and for healing.
And we figured out that this is a model process, right? So it's not as though Elko's pioneered it exactly, but there's probably some aspects of it that are unique.
Yeah, this type of operation's been used all over the world. I think dating back to the 80s is when child advocacy centers started appearing throughout the United States. So we didn't invent this process, but living in rural areas, we certainly face challenges that maybe other CACs don't.
Well, in fact, among the challenges that you talked about before, if I'm assuming this correctly, and this is, again, a result of previous conversations, some cases might not have been prosecuted, Tyler, because we didn't have a facility like this to help a victim and the family, and then to preserve evidence right off the bat?
Yeah, we didn't have medical professionals necessarily that were trained to do these types of examinations on children, which we had to send children to Salt Lake City or Twin Falls or Reno to get the proper examination, the proper collection of that evidence. And you can imagine time is very critical when it comes to the collection of evidence in these medical examinations. And it took time to get to these places. And a lot of the times families couldn't afford to take off work to travel to these places or pay for the fuel to get there. So that was a huge obstacle, and that did create problems in prosecution.
And so this is the hard part. We had to convince the community that a separate facility was needed because people really weren't ready to believe or sort of accept the fact that this was happening so readily. Yeah,
that was one of my, and still is, probably the biggest question I get about this facility is this a big enough problem in Elko County that we need to have this, $4.5 million building to address this issue? And it absolutely is. We needed it a long time ago, and those numbers are only increasing. We don't know if that's necessarily the result of the abuse is happening more often, or now people are feeling more comfortable in reporting the abuse, knowing that there are resources available to address those things.
All right, so we will definitely expect more prosecution as a result. We're talking with our district attorney, Tyler Ingram, about the Great Basin Child Advocacy Center. We'll talk more about victims and how the community can assist in this process, Tyler. A little bit more now, though, about the building. We understand it's a public-private partnership, right? I mean, just the construction was funded by some pretty phenomenal phenomenal resources.
Yeah, the William and Pennington Foundation, based out of Reno, donated the vast majority of the money. So that was a private funding. Taxpayer dollars were not used for that portion of it. The city of Elko donated the land, which was very generous. I think technically they sold it for $1, but that's a donation. And Elko County agreed to operate the building. And that building's organized under the DA's office and will hopefully continue to be long after I'm not there.
Well, and just to remind listeners the benefit of this, we do have other organizations within the county. I think the Terrace at Ruby View, our senior center, is maybe a good example of this kind of a partnership.
Yeah. The Pennington Foundation's been absolutely wonderful for Northern Nevada, but especially Elko County, where the people who live here get to see that money put to work.
And so you mentioned a price tag. Would you mind talking just a little about the particulars?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact amount of money that it cost to build that building, but somewhere in the ball field of $5 million. We do have leftover money, so we did stay under budget, which was very nice. And then the county is going to operate that building as far as some staffing, which is funded through other county partnerships, White Pine County, Eureka County, Lander County, hopefully. And then we're using existing staff at the DA's office to fill in the gaps. And then the other positions within that facility will be independent contractors, and we're continually applying for grants to fund those positions.
You know, that's really significant. It seems as though you addressed a few issues, Tyler, in that we do know that space is an issue right now, even at the county administrative building. And so you didn't have to hire more people. You have new places to house some people.
We do, including detectives. 2 from the Elko Police Department are now permanently working out of that building, which is amazing to see that our police chief has supported that from the beginning. But it's really neat to see that actually now working in our facility. The sheriff's department, our sheriff, has also dedicated 1 full-time detective at this time, with plans to add another one in the future. And again, those aren't additional positions that taxpayers are paying. Those were detectives that were already working on these types of cases. Now they're just in a little bit different environment.
And that is an important point. Were you able to, did you need to hire any staff, Tyler, or were you simply able to invest most of the money in the infrastructure?
Most of the money in infrastructure, but we did hire our coordinator, who's really makes sure that place runs every day. But again, that money is coming from a donation from Eureka and White Pine counties.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is a facility that will be used by other rural communities. They've had the same issue we have had, right?
Correct. We'll take children and families from anywhere in the world, really, but our focus is on Eureka, Lander, Elko, and White Pine counties.
All right. And is there a foundation or a separate board of directors, for example?
There's some members on the board of directors that were instrumental in making this happen today, meaning, finally getting into our facility, and they're still on that board. Really what that's changing into is what we call Friends of the CAC, and so their main focus is on raising money for operation costs.
And we should talk about that. You mentioned this being a county function per se of the district attorney's office, but your budget is only so big and you're not out there fundraising.
Correct. My budget did not increase by adding this building. This is something that I promised the county commissioners that, at least for the time being, we would not ask for more money from them, taxpayer funded. We would continue to operate on grant funds. And as you know, Lori, these have been substantially cut. So we're always looking for ways to continue to operate that building without going back to the commission and asking for money.
Tyler Ingram is our guest, as he's Elko County District Attorney, and of course one of the many visionaries and partners of the Great Basin Child Advocacy Center, which opens with a ribbon cutting and a grand opening today to the community. Other partners we wanted to mention, I know, for example, I sit on the board of directors for the Elko County Committee Against Domestic Violence, Tyler, and this is an important collaboration.
Absolutely, yeah. Abuse just isn't, I should say it's multifaceted. So the abuse that CADV deals with goes hand in hand with what we're dealing with. One of the things I'm most proud of with the CAC is that Nevada Gold Mines gave us money to fund the mental health aspect of this. So 4 days a week, we have a mental health professional on site to provide mental health services to children. And that is going on now. They're already seeing kids at that facility. And that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of.
You know, that's a good segue into this topic, which is not easy to talk about, but frankly, it should be, because that's really one of the only ways. My question is, how can we as a community stop this? Tyler?
I think the first thing in stopping this is reporting it. Sometimes it can be an uncomfortable situation to report that you suspect someone's being physically or sexually abused, because there's a certain stigma that could come with that. But unless professionals that are working out of that CAC and law enforcement know that this is going on, there's not a lot that we can do. So I think reporting it and awareness really is what I'm talking about. Awareness, I think, is the key to reducing the number of incidents of abuse.
And there aren't always obvious signs, right? I mean, people may have concerns. They may want to ask questions. What's the best way to go about that?
There's not always obvious signs, and especially in the cases of child sex abuse, these children are taught, and in our profession it's called groomed, to think that the behavior that they are enduring or the abuse that they're enduring is normal, and that every kid, this is just how life is. And it's not until a light bulb goes on and they say, this is not normal, and they report it. So it can go unreported for a long time.
And one of the questions that we want to ask too is there a consequence, a possible long-term consequence of unreported or untreated abuse? I mean, for both sides.
Absolutely. And not only the obvious consequences of having to endure that on their own, meaning they don't have any outside help to address the issues, both physical and mental. But we have found that when we don't address the trauma that a child experiences from abuse, that they themselves have a higher likelihood of becoming an abuser in the future. So it's a cycle similar to domestic violence, Lori, that you're involved in with the CADV, is that you need to stop that cycle and not let it continue with generations in the future.
And among the issues, sometimes people are reluctant to report this because it is common, frankly, that the perpetrator is known to the victim and may actually be a member of the family.
Yeah, more often than not, it is somebody known to the family, and that can cause some very serious drama within the family unit, especially if it's somebody who is the breadwinner for the family. What happens if we report this abuse and that person no longer has a job? Now the family doesn't have a home, can't pay their bills. So it's not as simple as just the abuse happened and it's reported. There's a lot that goes into that.
So Tyler, because we know that this is prevalent, this is occurring, and it needs to be stopped, what kind of punishment is afforded to those convicted? And keeping in mind what you just said, are there some mitigating circumstances? Does the district attorney's office, do these professionals within the center work with a family?
We always work with the family. The focus is on the child, but we have to necessarily work with the family. The punishments vary depending on the abuse. Almost all child abuse, especially the sexual abuse, are felonies, and even up to sexual assault of a child, which is a life sentence. So the punishments are very severe. In my opinion, there's never any mitigating circumstance for somebody who commits a crime against a child, especially physical or sexual. But one circumstance that we take into account when we are handling the prosecution of a case is how much more trauma are we going to cause a child to the child if we continue with the process through jury trial, meaning that they have to testify at a preliminary hearing, they have to come back and testify at a jury trial. And I've had cases that I've prosecuted personally where a victim has attempted suicide multiple times leading up to trial. And sometimes what the community doesn't understand is that if we negotiate a case, it's not because we think that a child abuser deserves a break, but we try to weigh the punishment for the defendant against the trauma that it's going to cause to a child to tell a jury of 12 strangers what happened to them.
Wow, that's really, I'm thinking about the situation with the teacher from Wells who was convicted, Tyler. I mean, this is a real scenario in our community. This happened and is continuing to happen.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, the biggest question I've got is this happening enough here in Elko County that we need this facility? And I can tell you without a doubt it's happening every single day. There are not many weeks that go by that we're not doing multiple forensic interviews of children who have disclosed some type of abuse.
We also want to qualify children. That's anybody under the age of 18.
Correct.
Okay.
However, our facility did designate one medical examination room for adults to perform sexual assault examinations on adults. And that was mostly to provide a more comfortable place for an adult to go if they need that type of an examination, as opposed to going to the emergency room and going through that process.
And so, Tyler, in keeping with that too, untreated abuse, both the offender and the victim, unreported, untreated, have there been and do there continue to be serial perpetrators in our area?
I can't think of a perpetrator off the top of my head that has been convicted, released, and then is now reoffended. But I'm comfortable saying that in our community right now, there is a serial perpetrator, one or more, that are doing this to multiple children that up to this point have simply gone unnoticed or unreported.
We have seen reports in the past of someone of maybe a particular age who might be targeting teenagers. Boys or young men or women, right, Tyler?
Yeah, and what's really facilitating that and making it easier for these perpetrators is the use of social media and the internet. They all have their benefits and their place, but a vast majority of our cases have some connection to social media or the internet.
Isn't that an easy way to lure someone and then to sort of trap them by sexting, for example, encouraging them to send photos?
Absolutely. We're seeing it all the time. Yep. We have a great partnership with the FBI and HSI, who have been really, proactive in investigating those types of cases. And because of that, we are receiving more of those cases in our office that we're actually prosecuting, that the federal government is investigating.
So, Tyler, is it a crime for teenagers to send photos of themselves to each other?
It can be, yes. Yep. Under certain circumstances, it absolutely could be. And we are seeing, like I think you alluded to just a minute ago, and that is asking for these pictures, receiving a nude picture, and then basically extorting somebody saying that, I'm going to publish this if you don't do X for me. And that can put a child especially in a really precarious position.
I was just going to ask you, for a parent, or even if there is somebody, a young person listening that has been a victim in this situation, do we want to underscore who the victim is in this? Because I'm sure the person who feels like they sent the picture may have committed the crime or have been led to believe that.
Yeah, no, I would like them to know that we have your back. These types of things happen and you're not the criminal. We really want to focus on the other side of that.
Okay. So we do know Safe Voice and our school resource officers are probably a good place for teenagers to report bullying, dating violence, this kind of sextortion, I think it's called, Tyler?
Yeah, our school resource officers are amazing resources for this type of thing. My interaction with school resource officers at the schools have led me to believe that these children look up to these officers. They almost seem like they're on a friend level with these kids, and I think that's wonderful. And that level of trust has already proven to be beneficial for disclosing abuse. And I personally would like to see one of those officers in every single school.
Tyler Ingram is our Elko County District Attorney. And of course, we're talking about our Child Advocacy Center, which is up and operational, but there is a community celebration of sorts with a ribbon cutting and grand opening at 3 o'clock today. So another aspect of what we were just discussing is viewing and downloading images, pornography, child pornography, how to detect it, how to report it. Tyler, some people are under the impression that pornography is okay.
Yeah, it's I don't have the statistics in front of me, but just based off of seeing these cases come across our desk, I can say the number of child pornography cases is on the rise. And I think the detection key is just staying involved in your children's lives. Know what they're doing. That's sometimes as a parent, it's okay to pry. It's not our job as a parent to be a friend all the time to our children. And sometimes we have to do things that make our children uncomfortable. And if knowing their business, what they're doing online, what they're doing with their social media, I think that's the key. That's how we start. But we don't really have the ability to stop the free flow or exchange of child pornography images among adults. Right? We can monitor our children's stuff, but we are seeing so much exchange of child pornography between adults that it's sad, it's sickening. And again, going back to the federal government, their law enforcement agencies are doing a wonderful job cooperating with our local law enforcement to hand us these cases. We're getting them all the time.
And we can see a direct correlation between not only online victims, but sometimes that emboldens people to victimize children in our community.
Absolutely. I think there's a very strong connection between the two.
And here's the other, you don't have to be a pedophile, correct, to be involved in the abuse of children, sexual abuse or some sort of physical or emotional abuse.
No, I mean, in my opinion, simply having child pornography images is abusing a child because that child is being subjected to somebody's prying eyes that don't need to be there.
So again, if you are a parent or a caregiver or you're even a sibling in a household and you're not confident about what is going on, but you may have a suspicion, first of all, as you said, you'll probably know it when you see it, right?
You probably will know it when you see it. And I like to tell people that even if you're not 100% sure that somebody's being abused, but you have that hunch, you're not going to get in trouble for reporting it. You're doing the right thing by telling somebody. Let the professionals decide whether someone's actually being abused or not.
And the last question, I think, within this category of the current state of child sexual abuse is we do hear an awful lot about human trafficking, Tyler, and so it might be valuable to talk about how Elko County is involved in that.
Yeah, we have, of course, Highway 93 and we have Interstate 80, which are major travel corridors. So while we're not I don't think we've seen a single sex trafficking case prosecuted here locally, there is no doubt that these are crossing through our borders. So they do go hand in hand. Sex abuse and child sex trafficking, of course, go hand in hand.
And obviously our program today, we're focusing on children, but anybody listening and wondering, we do have legal brothels within the community, right, Tyler?
Yep, we have legal brothels, and of course those are fairly well monitored by local law enforcement. But again, it takes everybody in our community, not just cops, not just prosecutors, to speak up and say something if they suspect something is happening.
Mm-hmm. And we do know, as you said, that we have police officers that go into our licensed establishments. Weekly, I believe they make unscheduled visits.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they're keeping an eye on it, but we don't have law enforcement present in every single place at every single moment. So we need the community's help.
So obviously, if there were concerns about human trafficking, people being subjected to something against their will, and certainly children, anything that would be perpetrated against them, and they are children under the age of 18, that is already a crime. They cannot give consent.
It's already a crime. That's correct.
Okay. So now we want to move on to the part of our discussion about what we are able to do, and not only with this Child Advocacy Center, but are we able to help victims to recover emotionally and physically?
Yeah, and going back to what I said, one of the aspects that I'm most proud of is our mental health treatment. And while at least it's more talked about now, that there used to be this stigma surrounding asking for help, especially mental help. I would like to think that that's going away at least a little bit. And we want the community to know that we actually have mental health professionals who are amazing at what they do. They are amazing at what they do. And they are available free of charge to victims to help with that mental health aspect. So I think that's probably the focus of healing, is making sure their mind is right, making sure that they know that they're not to blame for the abuse that they endured, and that life can go on, although it's not as easy of a road, but it can go on.
I'm recalling an interview with Tanya Yale, your victim witness and liaison within your department, and I know she's a big part of this Child Advocacy Center and will continue to be. And Tanya talking about that as though you can move on from this, and that's the goal of the center, right?
That is the goal. That is the main goal, is to help a child move on after they've endured abuse. Absolutely.
And I think by simply having an actual physical building and all these professionals working on this common cause, that should solidify, that should actually support them in knowing they're not alone. Yeah,
and that's what I was kind of talking about earlier, is that I don't know if we're seeing more cases of abuse or we're just having more of them reported. And I think it's because we're having more of them reported. They think that somebody's going to first believe them, and then once they're believed, that they can continue to get help, that they have resources available.
And if someone doesn't believe you, go to the next person, because otherwise you're going to carry that burden, right? It's just going to be worse.
Absolutely. And I think our Child Advocacy Center and our law enforcement officers always err on the side of believing until they don't.
Tyler Ingram is our Elko County District Attorney and our guest here on Elko Live today. Again, this is a topic that I think it will get easier to discuss as we go on, and now that we have the building there. Something else to mention, this is not really a walk-in facility, right? I mean, we want to encourage people to get information, to feel comfortable reporting, to ask questions, but there's not really a public access to the building.
Correct. For security reasons, of course, we have children in there who are likely disclosing that someone's abused them. So it's not a building that somebody could walk into at any point in time. But access to the building is fairly easy. There's a process in place already, but it typically starts with a child disclosing some sort of an abuse, for example, to a teacher or a counselor at school. Mandatory reporters are then required to report to law enforcement. Law enforcement then immediately contacts our facility, and that's where the ball gets rolling. And then, of course, their appointments are set up for the medical exams, for the forensic interview, and for any aftercare that they need.
And do parents get to accompany children, or will they have caregivers?
Parents can accompany children to the center, of course, but the forensic interviews are done without the parent in the room, but they're in the same facility. The medical exam room is set up to where a parent or a guardian can wait just outside of the exam room so that they're not actually seeing the process, but they can hear their child. And we never force a child to do any of this. This is completely voluntary.
And obviously the goal is to prosecute if possible, right? Or at least at the very minimum to stop the abuse and to stop the cycle.
Correct. So again, the focus of this building is not on making a better case for prosecution. The focus is on the mental well-being, or the well-being of the child, both mental and physical. But as a consequence of this facility, we're able to gather better evidence from the medical examination that we talked about earlier, and the forensic interviews, who are done by professionals who are actually trained to interview children in this type of situation, almost always non-law enforcement. It's a neutral interviewer who is just simply gathering information in a non-suggestive way. So when this process is used, we almost always get a better case sent to us for prosecution. And of course, better cases mean better results. And to me, if somebody committed a abuse against the child, whether it be physical or sexual, the best result is them being sent to prison for a very long time.
And you have had some of those cases, right, Tyler? This isn't just a wishful thinking.
We have had too many. Too many.
Okay. So I guess in closing today, as we send you on your way to the ribbon cutting for the Great Basin Child Advocacy Center, we would just ask what comes next, and if people are interested in this topic, maybe how they could help support the center in the future.
Yeah, like I said earlier, we are almost entirely grant funded, so we are always looking for financing for operating costs so that I'm not asking our county commissioners for more money. If you would like to donate, we have the Friends of the CAC, it's a 501c nonprofit, so you can donate through that. You can donate directly through the facility. And if anybody has any questions whatsoever about what we do over there, I will personally take their phone call.
All right, Tyler Ingram. Thank you thank you for everything, really. It's sad that we need the building, but it's great that we have it.
I'm really happy it's opening, but like you said, it's bittersweet because it's sad that we need it, but I'm happy it's available.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. Again, the ribbon cutting is at 3 o'clock this afternoon at 1401 College Avenue, the Great Basin Child Advocacy Center. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today.